And I said, I know how you feel. He said, no, you don't. You don't. You don't know how I feel. He said, I don't know what your relationship was like with your son. I don't know what kind of bond you had. And you know, he was right. He was right. And I'll never say that again. I'll never say I know how you feel, because you don't. You don't know how somebody feels, you know? That pain of grieving the loss of a loved one it hurts.
But as I said, Phil, already, thank you so much for joining me on here. And as I'm sure a lot of people that already know you, found you in a similar path with your discussion on TED Talks, primarily first. I could be mistaken there. But it's without me having to say how powerful of a story it is of what you've gone through with your son in your life. So I would love to start off with your story and have it come out of your mouth as opposed to me. So wherever you'd normally start or would like to start, please go ahead and thank you.
Sure. Yeah. My story begins with back in July of 2015. My only son, my only child, and his close friend were last seen leaving the Jupiter Inlet on a 19-foot fishing boat. There was some really bad storms carrying heavy rains and winds of 40 miles an hour. And after several attempts to reach the boys via their cell phones, we reached out to the Coast Guard, and one of the largest and most extensive searches in the history of the Coast Guard ensued. Neither of the boys were ever found, and exactly what happened at sea that day still remains unclear. So that's been something that I've been, dealing with for the last 6.5 years, and so happy to be here in an effort to tell my story that hopefully even just maybe one word, one sentence might help other people to heal. Throughout the past, over the past 6.5 years, I've talked to so many people that have lost children and not lost children, and shared my story with them, and they'd share their story with me. And over the years, I just found that for some reason, my story would just, and the way I would just talk to people would be helpful. I've been pretty lucky to start a couple businesses. I've been fairly successful, but there's nothing that compares to somebody saying, thank you, you've helped me in a way that's helped them heal. So about a year ago, I quit my 6-figure job as VP sales for a global technology company in an effort to pursue what I feel God has on my heart. And in short, that's empowering mostly men who are struggling with grief.
It's interesting. There's so many things I would want to unpack there, but why do you find men? Is it because you're a man yourself, or you think it's a topic that most men maybe, keep within?
It's a great question. First of all, mostly, men, especially men who have lost children, as a culture, we have a tendency to flock around the moms, which I totally get. And that makes perfect sense to me. Generally dad wants to be strong for his kids and his wife. And what I found through talking to so many men is that the last person they really want to open up with is their wife. And they leave it. They wind up burying the pain. They push it down. There's a lot of guys just go right back into work, or they'll focus on something completely different. And unfortunately, when you do that, I kind of compare it to trying to hold a beach ball underwater. I mean, you could do it, and then you could do it for a while, but eventually it's going to find its way out to the surface. And the harder and further you push it down, the harder and faster it comes up. And sometimes it just hits you right in the face. And most men, I feel like they just don't know how to express it, how to express themselves. And I think just, through talking and, some helpful advice on things they can actually do, they find, some way to at least take that first step, which eventually leads to the next and the next from there. But I think guys just have a tendency, to turn away from it as opposed to actually opening up and being vulnerable and feeling the pain. And in my talk, I even said in my TED Talk, I said, and it's still true to this day, the only way that I was truly able to begin to heal from indescribable amounts of pain, was to begin to feel the pain, to stop running from it, to acknowledge it, and sometimes even to sit in it. And over time, I started to become open to the memories and more connected to the reminders, as opposed to, just pushing them away.
That is definitely a common theme that I've experienced on my own, and from the people that I have spoken to, and just what I've read and all that, in regards to feeling the pain and leaving yourself in it. And obviously that does relate to what you said about men. For whatever reason, the masculinity tends to lead to holding things in, which then, as you mentioned, the beach ball will pop up and lead to so many other things, that whether physically or mentally. So what was it for you that what gave you that awareness to feel your emotions? Were you like one of the many men and many people in this world that just hold it in? And if so, was it someone you spoke to? What led you to that kind of aha moment?
Definitely started out, at first I really had no idea. There's no training or, preparation for something like this. So I really had no idea what I was supposed to do. And came to a point where I eventually I Googled how to grieve. And the well-known model referred to as the 5 stages of grief has dominated searches around this topic for decades. And, when I saw, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, for me, I almost felt like I was doing something wrong because I didn't experience grief like that at all. So I thought I really had no idea what I should do. I did also go and, seek counseling, of course, talk therapy. I did EMDR therapy, and none of that, although it was helpful, none of that really took away the pain. And I don't think the pain will ever fully go away. There's days, all the time where I find myself, crying because I miss my son, and that I don't think that will ever go away. But I think, one of the biggest things for me, in terms of actually healing from that was in one of those moments when I was crying on the floor in a ball, curled up in a dark room, and call it an apparition, call it, I look back at this and I wonder, did I really see what I saw? But I definitely heard my son, and I know with absolute confidence and conviction that my son would not want me to live that way. Where my brother, my oldest brother, he worked for Tony Robbins. He's worked there for about 15 years. He's one of the head of coaching coaching sales. And, I've always worn like bracelets that say live with passion. And with Perry on the way, when I would take Perry to school every day, I would listen to this podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with JLD and Entrepreneur on Fire.
Yeah. Lee Dumas, right?
We'd listen to that on the way to school. And I just wanted him to know that, to do what you love, find something you love and do that, because, the money will eventually come. So, I saw Perry and he just said, Dad, get up. And the way that he said it was almost like, come on, Dad, enough, enough, enough. He's like, just get up and go live with passion, like you always told me to do. And I'll see you when you get here, and, when something like that, occurs with, your child, I couldn't help but feel tremendous amounts of guilt and shame and worthlessness, that I couldn't do more to protect him. But in looking back, I'm not sure what I would have been able to do in that situation to actually stop it from happening. But him telling me that let me realize that I just needed to give myself permission to feel to be okay again, because that for me, that was what I was searching for, just to know that life would be okay again. And, it's not that Perry gave me permission. It's that he showed me that I needed to give myself permission, and when I did that, I started taking sticky notes I used Post-it notes, and I would write on things like, I give myself permission to heal. And I'd stick them in my car and on my refrigerator, my bathroom mirror, and I would look at them every day. And I would just knew that was what I needed to get better, was to just give myself permission that it was okay, that I didn't need to feel so much guilt and shame and worthlessness and all the other things that come along with what I went through. So that was definitely part of it. And also, I remarried about 3 years ago. And my wife, at first, I really didn't let her in a lot because, you think like, she doesn't have any kids, and we don't have any kids together. So, it was my hallucination that she wouldn't be able to truly understand how I felt about it. But then one year, this one past year, really, it would have been Perry's 21st birthday. And I decided to do something different. And she and I went to a local restaurant and we toasted my son, and I started crying, a lot. And, she's amazing because, she did what a lot of people should do, I think, when somebody's grieving, is you don't try to fix it, don't try to pull you out of it. Just be there, she just sat there with me, cried with me, held my hand. And, I came back feeling like, an extreme weight had been lifted. And I realized that, sharing with other people and letting other people in is a lot more helpful than you think. I think it was, I was scared, I guess, to let her see me, ugly cry, so to speak, to really let it out, but really the reverse happened, is that, I found tremendous amounts of healing, and now it's even so much easier for me to talk to her about it and let her in. So I think, for most men, they should try something new. Let people, those who love you, especially if somebody's trying to ask you to spend that milestone day, whether it's a birthday or the date of the death, and you want to push them away and you want to go and do it by yourself, maybe for a period of time, that's okay. But I would suggest that trying letting somebody who's, loves you and wants to be there for you, to let them in, because you'll find a tremendous amount of healing from it. At least I did.
That's amazing about letting people in. I feel like even myself, have experiencing death so intimately. For a while, I never knew. I was like, well, I don't know what to say to this person. And then at some point, I feel like I couldn't agree more as to what you said. I just, no matter what the problem, whether it's grief, loss, or whatever we're going through, just be there for them. So I'm the type of guy, like, I'll put my hand on your shoulder, and that's my expression for I'm here. I don't have to say anything because I don't know if you want me to say anything. So I think it's actually part of, not the responsibility, that's the wrong word, but it helps if the person who's grieving to express that openness. And I think that'll help allow people to recognize that it's a little bit of a signal to maybe let you in, but especially trying new things, because if something's not working, you got to try something else. And I wanted to take the second to introduce something that I've heard you speak about, and the Grief Continuum. And I feel like, I hope I'm understanding this correctly, but it relates to what you just said in regards to, you didn't know if you were doing things right, especially when you related it to the 5 stages of grief, how it was so, chronological, and you didn't feel that way. And that was a big lesson for me in particular, that A, there's no right way to grieve, and then B, everyone starts at a different place. And am I understanding your continuum correctly, that maybe the end goal is the same, but where we start on that graph, if you will, could be anywhere?
Definitely. That's one of the points that I was trying to make, is that grief doesn't always start at denial, nor does it end at acceptance. There are potential gifts that can be found in grief, that you may not even see or realize or recognize. And I think for me, the word acceptance, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that sounds almost like, I don't know, a couple levels below resignation. It's just like there's more. And I think, if one of the biggest things for me is, finding a purpose and a meaning, through going what I've gone through, and now being able to help, other men and women. But my heart is just to help men. Is really a gift and something that I never really knew I even possessed. I never knew. I mean, my professional identity really was always Phil Cohen, VP sales. I like to run sales teams. I mostly for SaaS startup companies, and I'm really, really good at it. And that's the way that I've identified myself throughout the years. And to kind of shift that change from, to I empower men struggling with grief. It took a moment for me to go through that. But with the Grief Continuum, yes, I don't think you start at one place, that we all start at the same place, and that we all graduate through the same stages to eventually arrive at the same result, like school. It's just, it doesn't work that way. And although, the 5 stages of grief, I'm sure, has helped a lot of people. I'm not saying that it's wrong or that you shouldn't pay attention to it. I'm sure a lot of people have found healing from it, but there is no one size fits all model for grief, and you might experience 1 stage of grief. You might experience 2, you might experience 12, and if you do, it doesn't mean that you're grieving wrong, and it just like you could, I figured you could find yourself finding gifts way past acceptance and easily, see something or hear something that reminds you of that person and find yourself in tears the same day. And again, it doesn't mean that you're grieving wrong, that I thought I've hit acceptance, like I'm not supposed to be crying now because I reached acceptance. It's just that to me, that it doesn't work that way. And there is no right or wrong way. So instead of it being a step by step to eventually reach a certain place, I look at it more like a continuum that we move back and forth throughout the journey of grief. There really is no certain beginning or certain ending.
Yeah. Would you agree that grief is kind of like, it's a living organism? You kind of hit the nail on that earlier, that, you shouldn't try to fix it because it's kind of with you, right? It's like, it's kind of an evolving thing that we kind of grow around as opposed to, or grow with, perhaps. I don't know the right terminology for that. But it's definitely something that is hard to figure out if you're doing it right. And like I think we're figuring out that there's no right way to do it, but there is progress to be had. And clearly you've had a tremendous amount of progress. So do you contribute it to that? When you said resignation, did you mean, is that like similar, like letting go? Is that, am I understanding that correctly? Or what did you mean by resignation exactly?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like to say I've reached acceptance, it just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like enough for me, I guess. I maybe
feels final for something that's going to stay with us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just the word for some reason. I don't know. I think there's everybody needs that time to grieve. And that could take you, months. It could take you years. But it's not like some of the things that I like to talk about, it might be too soon. I think, for some people, let's say, that have just experienced tremendous loss, because you need to go through that period, whatever that looks like for you. But eventually, just like my son Perry, I'm sure the person that loves you the most that you're grieving would also tell you to get up. That person would not want to see you in a dark room, curled up in a ball. They want to see you live your life, and there's I don't know if you've heard, have you ever heard about the kind of the buffaloes and the cow metaphor?
No, I would love to hear it.
Okay. Well, there's all of us experience storms, right? I mean, that's just, there's no way we're making it out of this life unscathed in some way. And really the only choice that we have is how we respond to those storms. And one of my mentors, a guy named Rory Vaden, helped me understand this by sharing a story about where he grew up, near the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And Colorado is one of the only places in the world where both buffaloes and cows can coexist. And I really think that there's a fantastic lesson that can be learned about how each of these creatures responds to storms. So When the storms come over the Rockies, they almost always brew from the west and they roll towards the east. And cows can sense the storm coming. And so what they do is they begin to run east to get away from the storm. The only problem is that if you know anything about cows, they're not very fast. So the storm catches up to them pretty quickly. And without knowing any better, the cows continue to try and outrun the storm. But instead of outrunning it, they run with it. And that maximizes the amount of time and pain and frustration that he experienced from the storm. And it's been my experience that, humans do the very same thing. We spend so much of our lives trying to avoid the inevitable trials and tragedies and transitions that come along with difficult circumstances. But what buffaloes do is quite unique to the animal kingdom. Buffaloes wait for the storm to cross over the crest of the mountaintop. And as the storm rolls over the ridge, they turn and they charge directly into the storm. They run at the storm. And by running at the storm, they run right through it, minimizing the amount of pain, time, and frustration that they experience from the storm. But notice that it's the same storm, and I think it's just an excellent metaphor for all of us because although we're all in different places in life, we all have storms.
That is fantastic. Is that the original? You've heard this by someone, or did you come up with that? Because I don't know how I never heard that.
Yeah, no. There's a couple of them that I've come across over the years. I heard it from Rory Vaden. He's a best-selling author.
Sorry,
yeah. He has a community called the Brand Builders Group, and it helps people kind of figure out what they are, what they want to do, how to get their message out there. And I originally heard it from him. And there's there's another one that's similar about running towards the roar. I don't know if you've ever heard
No, I feel like I should be taking notes here. This is fantastic.
Tell me to stop if I'm talking.
No, I'm good. This is great.
Okay. I may not know this one as well, but it's something like, the male and female lions. The male lions are basically the lazy ones, right? They kind of just sit down and sleep and eat. And the female ones are the hunters. But when animals go to, let's say, a body of water, what they'll do is the female lions will wait on the other side of where the actual male lion roar will come from purposefully so that when they come behind them and they let out this gigantic roar, they will run away from the roar and run directly into the trap, essentially, running right towards the female lions that will attack and then eventually kill them. And so the metaphor of running towards the roar and running towards the storm is something that I think that a lot of people they could just take away a certain lesson from that, but it's only at a certain time, you can't run towards the storm or, run towards the roar right away. I think you really need to feel that pain first,
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head that so many people don't do. And from what I'm taking from it, I mean, I feel like within all those stories, it's kind of, there's no right way to do it. Like you said, the buffalo and the cow are kind of responding in two different ways. And from that, it's all about how we respond. Because I feel like so many times it's so easy to get caught up in what's happening. And I feel like there's an importance to realizing that even though whatever the trauma is or whatever you're going through feels as if you're one with that and it's just smothering you, I do believe there is a duality to both of them, that you can be separated from it in some way, if that makes sense, where you don't have to, based on how you respond, you don't have to dwell on it too much. And it's going to affect you, and there's no way of running from how it's going to feel, but you do have a choice on how you respond. And I think that's such a big lesson of what you've gone through and how you're kind of handling it. And from what you've gone through, I lost my father, and I don't have children, and I'm not putting a hierarchy on death and losing someone, but losing a child, I can't fathom or ever pretend to comprehend. And I've only seen it from my grandmother when my dad died. Seeing that type of emotion come from it, it was just different. And so in respect to what you went through and backwards of feeling the different emotions in a different chronological order, do you see, even though you related to not being like school and there's kind of a graduation, did you see any sort of graduation with those emotions? because there's a book I'm reading now by Dr. Hawkins. I'm not sure if you read it, called Letting Go. I've mentioned it prior in another episode, but he kind of deduces from every emotion, regardless of the order it comes. If you start with whatever might be anger, from anger, once you feel and absorb yourself within anger, it might take you to another emotion. It's kind of like dissecting each emotion, graduating to the next emotion, regardless of the order. Did you find that at all with what you went through, whatever emotion you felt first?
Yes, yes. There was definitely different emotions at different times, and there was, one of the other things that kind of threw me off about, the whole 5 stages thing was, so there was a period of time where I experienced revenge,
Interesting.
then that's not something that's really covered in the 5 stages, Now you might think, some people might say that's, a phase of anger potentially. But yeah, I definitely went through different stages for sure. And probably experienced some of, definitely experienced some of the ones that are, in the 5 stages. But to me, feeling like, complete worthlessness and shame, that's not the same thing as, for me, as just depression. I think it's almost like just a different category, if you will. But yes, and there were times because of this played out on the national news for 7 days. I mean, that's how long the search lasted. So it was basically on national news, especially on the East Coast, every day, and social media. And then when I went back out in the public eye, so to speak, I saw people, like, they would look at me, and I know that they were saying, oh, that's Perry's dad, the kid that was lost at sea. And I remember thinking, like, what's a man who lost his son at sea supposed to look like? Like,
Right.
what am I supposed to do? Like, how am I? And it took me a while to even feel okay to smile, to have people see me smiling. Like, because so many people would say to me, I don't even know how you're walking around right now. I don't even know how you're living. How are you doing all this? It's just, and, there's a saying, I think, where focus goes, energy flows. I'm not sure. I think maybe Tony Robbins may have coined it. I've heard it a couple of times, but, you know, it's just like, it's when the sun's out, right? It covers a huge amount of the earth, and you can stand almost anywhere under it and feel like, you're being wrapped in a warm blanket. Yet when you take a magnifying glass and focus its energy in one small area, you can create fire. And I believe that the same is true of the thoughts that we choose to focus on. So one of the biggest things right afterwards was, you know, I found myself asking why. That would be like, why me? That question, why me, and there's nothing wrong with that question. And in fact, for a season, I believe that it's one that it's worth exploring. But the brain is a servo mechanism. So if we ask it a question, even subconsciously, it's going to search for and provide the answers. I think, the trick is asking the right questions that will ultimately serve you and those around you. So while why is a reasonable question, and one that I found myself asking for years, it wasn't until I switched the question from why to what that things began to change for me. So, when tragedy strikes, one of the 3 T's, I call them tragedies, trials, or major transitions. As humans, we really find out what we're really made of when we start to ask ourselves, okay, what am I going to do about it now? And that's when really things started to help change for me is what can I do with what I've learned through this process?
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it now. It seems like you mentioned there's grief comes with gifts. That's I'm sure you've realized already. You don't need me to say it, that you're sharing the gift with the world right now. So I wanted to ask, because I'm seeing some consistencies. You mentioned the Post-it notes and, the power of your thoughts. How much do you contribute your healing and what you're doing today in regards to I want to say those affirmations or those auto suggestion or whatever you want to call it, but specifically those Post-it notes, you're affirming this, that, and the other. Did you notice a change with that?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because again, it would come down to, what we choose to focus on, what we're thinking about. I mean, it's so easy sometimes when something horrible happens for you to sit back in your recliner and let this movie play, right? Of all the what ifs and how you could have maybe made something different. But that's a choice, right? That's a choice, what you choose to focus on. And the fact is, I choose to focus on the fact that, number one, I was blessed to even have a child to begin with. And, there's so many people that would give anything to be able to have a child and have never been able to have one. And I focus on the amazing 14 and a half years that I did get to spend with him, and all those amazing memories that we did get to create together. I'm Christian by faith, so I do believe that, I will see him again, and I think about the work that I'm doing now, and I want him to be proud, of hhis dad, and know that I'm, doing something ultimately to that brings honor, to him and to me, and to know that, that I'm making him proud, in some small way. I feel is definitely helps me get through it. But yes, I guess maybe I'm lucky. I don't know. I've never asked other people, specifically, do you think your child wants to see you, like, in so much pain? But the fact is that they, I know, like, Perry's natural state was just a state of laughter and fun. Like, he was just such a great kid. So I know he doesn't want me to be living that way. So, the way that I was, especially for years afterwards. So, it's just, for me, I just tried to focus on all the positive things. And I guess, yeah, it does come along with some affirmations. Yeah.
It seems like you found your why, and how we already illustrated how important that is in life in general. And you kind of brought up a question that I was thinking about asking was, for you, you're saying, you were lucky, blessed, however you want to say, because I feel a similar aspect with my father. I know my dad wouldn't want to see any of us, my mom, my sisters, live a life of misery and depression and this and that. So that was definitely a helpful driving force of a why.
Yeah.
But what about those people? This is rhetorical, or if you have any thoughts on it, but what about the people that aren't, like you said, aren't confident in that? Because definitely there's people that it can't be easy to find a why. And for me, I'm blessed in the same way you just said. I am able to find a why. If I dig deep and I decide that I want to get out of it, I can find a why, and I have my why. But there are people out there that can't find a why. And I feel like without a why, you have no reason to even want to get better or get better, no matter what the situation is. So I wonder what is a great method to find a why? Is it just sitting there and just thinking? Is it, what the hell is it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I
don't think there's a right way to do it, back to the scratch, but there's got to be some methods or.
Well, there's definitely going to be, I would say, if I had to guess, about 10% of the people that I speak to or I come in contact with would say something along the lines of, Phil, listen, I don't care what you have to say. Regardless of anything you have to say or share with me, I lost the most precious person in my life. My life is over. And there are a percentage of people out there, I think, that may never find a why, or may never even find a way to heal, so if people ask, okay, so what do you think are the top 3 things, or the top, couple of things people can do to heal? The first for me, and first and foremost above anything else, is it's a decision, right? Like you have to decide that you almost like, you might not have the end in mind, but you have to decide that healing is something I want to pursue, and whatever that looks like for you, might be different than it looks like for me. But at least you have to pursue, at least know that, yes, healing is something that I do want to pursue. And I think if you don't make that decision to actually say, yes, I do want to pursue healing, then there's going to be no program or guru or book or any of that that's going to help, because you've already made that decision, you know? And I think about probably about 80% of the people were like how I was, which is, all right, you know, I'm still living, you know, still holding down a job, but, you know, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with any of this. Sometimes I felt like there's something in there that I know I'm supposed to be doing, but I didn't know what it was for years. Like I didn't even know what it was. And I found that through just talking to other people, you know, just one-on-one, not even thinking about like trying to walk them through healing or walk them through a process or anything like that. It was just empathy, you know, it was just listening and trying to just talk to them. And then probably about, you know, the other 10% are people I feel like is the group I'm about to head into, which is, you know, take what's happened and change the world, you know, try to, you know, make a positive from it, do something good, help other people. You know, I don't know if there's an old Chinese tale about, if you heard about the woman with the magical mustard seed. Have you ever heard that one?
I haven't heard of mustard seed. I heard about a Chinese tale on a horse, so I don't think that's the same one.
So I mean, I get this the whole way, right? But essentially, there was a woman who lost her only son, and she went to, you know, a sage and said, you know, what magical potions or, you know, what magic can you help me to heal? And he said, well, I want you to go and find a mustard seed from a home that has never known sorrow. So she set out on her way and she saw a mansion, this big, beautiful mansion. And she went and she knocked on the door and she said, you know, somebody opened the door and she said, I'm in desperate need of a mustard seed from a home that has never known sorrow. Is this such a place? And they said, you're in the wrong place. You don't know, this home has definitely known sorrow. Here's exactly what happened. And she said, well, I can help you with that. You know, this is something that I've been through and here's how I can help you. And then she went to the next place and the next place, and she never found the home with no sorrow. But she was able to help so many people in her journey to find that magical mustard seed that eventually she forgot about it. You know, and I think that's like I feel like I'm on a similar path in a way. It's just trying to help people, and through trying to help other people, it's really helped me heal, you know?
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's what I was going to kind of allude to after this. I was curious if you have any, excuse me, some maintenance, if you will. You know, you're a little further down the path of, you know, the grief process, but so you do consider what you're doing, you work to help others, therefore helps yourself. Service.
Yeah. Maintenance. So I just want to make sure I understand the question right when you say maintenance.
Yeah, I might have butchered that, but I meant like just what's keeping you going today. You know what I mean? Like you're at a different stage now. So I just wonder if there's things you're doing today that, you know, kind of continue on your journey of healing. And is that what you're discussing in regards to your path today and what you're doing every day?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some of the bigger things for me was, you know, obviously helping other people. You know, that's, you know, that one of the biggest things for me that helps me get through this is just to edify others in some way. And also, you know, cultivating community. You know, I think if there's anybody, you know, out there that's listening and figuring out, well, what can I do? The first is, you know, you have to decide that this is okay. This is something I want to pursue. And then don't do it alone, you know, just like, you know, oak trees are often planted near one another, right, in bunches. And as they grow and mature, their root systems become intertwined, which provides the entire grove of trees with that extra strength. So when those storms come, you know, the trees, they're interconnected below the ground, then they hold sturdy despite the strong winds. And so if one of the oak trees lacks nutrients, it can actually draw on the roots of the other. And thus it remains healthy and strong throughout the worst weather conditions. And I believe that, you know, God designed us to be similar, to be connected with safe, open, vulnerable, loyal friends who'll stick together closer than a brother or sister during those tough times. However, you know, those relationships don't happen by default a lot of the times, really only by design, and they require intentionality and time to forge. But the sacrifice is well worth it in the end. You know, taking the time to also, like we mentioned, we touched on, to feel the pain. You know, most people, when they encounter dramatic loss or painful experiences, like we discussed. They'll run from the pain. And the fact is, pain can be terrifying. It's messy. It sneaks up on you, and it could be crippling, but it can't kill you. So, most of us are fearful of stepping into the pain and letting our hearts go and feel the full weight of it, because it makes us feel too exposed and vulnerable. And like I said, I found that to be especially true of men. And, even like I said in my TED Talk, unfortunately, I think as men, we're basically brainwashed to believe that, real men don't cry. We're just supposed to suck it up and tough it out. But, that strategy doesn't work with grief. So while most people push the pain down or box it up and try to carry on as though it doesn't exist, but unfortunately by doing so, they never actually come to a place of healing. And yeah, I mean, I think that those are probably some of the bigger ones.
Yeah,
I hope I answered the question.
You did. No, you did, and more and more. So it is interesting how you said, pain can't kill you. And the ironic part is that we're avoiding that so much. The pain might not kill you, but keeping that beach ball underwater and holding that pain in, that's what's going to kill you. So we're running from something that's going to heal us and hanging on to something that's going to literally end up killing you, God forbid. But I mean, it's a whole nother podcast and conversation, but holding that shit in eventually manifests into some kind of physical reality that is not going to be good for you. And this might be a loaded question, but how has your perspective on death changed? I don't know if I never really thought about death prior to losing my dad. So it'd be a hard question for me to answer myself, but where are you with death in general today?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
I don't mean to put you on the spot there. I should have told you that one was coming, but it just came to me.
No, it's good. It's good. I like it. I guess if you call it a gift, is that like I fear nothing now. Like the worst possible thing. Even with some health professionals might consider losing a child to be one of, if not the worst thing that can happen to a human being. So I feel like I've been through that. There's nothing that can hurt me now. Nothing that can hurt me as badly as that. So with death for me personally, like I definitely, when I think about that, I guess, I look forward to seeing my son again. I mean, I know that may sound crazy, but I have no fear of death for me personally. I think, I'm more fearful of losing even my wife or somebody that's really close to me, because after going through, losing my son and now having my wife who's right next to me and thinking wow, if I had to go through something like that again now and not have her, that scares me. That's something that really scares me. And I quite honestly, even, starting to do what I'm doing now, I mean, I don't have a master's degree in psychology, but I have a PhD in experience.
I was going to say, a PhD, and I've gone through that shit. That's often enough.
Exactly. So for me personally, I have no fear of death whatsoever. And I think it's just, thinking about, losing the people that I love scares me a little bit, because it's like, okay, here you are trying to talk and help people grieve. And what are you going to do the next time? Or the next person who's really close to you, how are you going to handle that, Phil?
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
so that part scares me a little bit.
That's the terrifying thing, is where I feel like there is a weird freedom of that experience happening because you've gone through it. And that's why I brought it up earlier, losing a child. I'm not, no disrespect to anyone that's lost anyone else or me losing my dad, but losing a child, I don't think anything compares. So that odd freedom of having gone through, arguably one of the worst things you can go through should free you in a sense that I'm not scared of anything, but also having experienced such pain is also kind of scary of going through it again, even though you might be more well-equipped, but that shit sucks. It just sucks. And so the thought, it makes you a little more prominent of going through it again, I feel like, in some sense. So,
I just want to touch on what you said real quickly, just because, so recently, like a couple weeks ago, a journalist from the Wall Street Journal reached out to me and said, I'm writing a piece on grief. She had lost her father a couple of weeks ago, and she was looking for advice, and she didn't want the same old trite advice that you hear everywhere else. So I gave her the whole, permission slips and giving yourself permission to heal, and she printed it. So it's out there right now. And in one of the comments online, somebody wrote something along the lines of, losing a parent, it doesn't even compare to losing a 14-year-old child. And you know what? In some ways I understand, but that's really not a fair thing to say,
right?
Because when I spoke with her before she wrote the column, and you could tell this is a woman who loved her father very, very much, and just like I'm sure you did. And that's one of the reasons why you're doing this right now. So to say it's not the same, well, that might be true that it's not, a natural progression, right? Like you expect to lose your parents before you go, right? That's expected, even though it's still hurtful, but the pain is still as deep, and it still hurts. And it hurts. Even I made the mistake a couple of years ago, and I was speaking to somebody, put me in touch with one of their friends who lost their child. And I said, I know how you feel. He said, no, you don't. You don't. You don't know how I feel. He said, I don't know what your relationship was like with your son. I don't know what kind of bond you had. And he was right. He was right. And I'll never say that again. I'll never say I know how you feel, because you don't. You don't know how somebody feels, That pain of grieving the loss of a loved one it hurts, it hurts. It hurts deep, and it hurts in a way that it's really indescribable. I've tried to put it into words, but you really can't. You really can't put it into words. And so, I don't think it's fair to anybody to say, you've lost a child, so it's worse, or, it's one person's grief is not as horrible as the other. So, I don't know. I just felt the need to say something along those lines because, yes, it's horrible, but their grief is grief. I don't think there are,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Different levels. I mean, there might be, but we could have felt, you and I, having lost different people, could have felt very, very similar things and have gone through very, very similar experiences, regardless of whether, it was my son or your father. So I don't know if I made the point that I wanted to make, but
you did. No, you did. You did. And that's why I was trying to be careful of saying the hierarchy of grief, because I don't believe in a hierarchy of grief. It's just like you said, there is a chronological difference. And I think it's it just seems like more of a shock, like you said, because it doesn't go in the natural way that a parent's always supposed to outlive their kid, but that's just not life. So you're right. Yeah. I think grief is grief, and we all deal with it a different way. And it's not the right way to, I agree in not agreeing that it's not appropriate, or there's no pain level. It's just pain. And whatever you feel, you feel. But, so we can go on.
You mentioned something a little bit earlier.
What was that?
I'm sorry.
No, please.
About not knowing what to say, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when people, that's one thing I feel like people ask me is like, what should I say to this person, And because, I've had people say the worst things, and they don't mean to, but sometimes people just say the worst things. So I don't know, one of the best things I ever heard was somebody saying, Phil, I'm so sorry for your loss. I know that there are no words. Just know that I love you and that I'm here for you. I think that's the perfect thing to say to somebody who's lost somebody, Because even something as simple as, how are you? It's like, well, how the heck do you think I am? Like, right? Like, you don't want to say I'm doing horrible, or you can't say I'm doing fine. So it's really a difficult thing for people, I think, to ask and to talk about. But, I think that I've been considering writing out, like, here's all the things you shouldn't say, a couple of really good things to say to somebody who's grieving.
It's actually, that's funny how, it's probably, there's a longer list of things you shouldn't say than you should say. Because I'm going to say there's no should, but just letting someone know you're there. And I don't know if that's the East Coast Italian thing. I mean, I just put my hand on you, but that's kind of my nonverbal way of saying it. I think people get it. But being there and giving the other person the opportunity to maybe hopefully be open enough to let you know what they need. Because I think we all need different things that I think that kind of gives everyone the best outlet, but I don't know. We're all still figuring it out at some point. But what I know we can go on for hours and hours. I wanted to ask you how are you? Like, how are you today?
How am I today? I think
like not today, just, you know what I mean? In general, like, how you doing?
Yeah, no, totally. I'm great, man. Really, I really am. I mean, I miss my son every day. It's not like something that's ever going to go away. But, I feel like really for the first time, I'm like on the path that I'm supposed to be on, So I wake up excited every day knowing that I get to help other people and to have these conversations like we're having today. And sometimes, I love speaking, going to speak to different types of groups and just having people come up to you or send you a message saying, man, what you said about this was so great, or what you said about that made so much sense to me. And thank you so much for sharing your story, So I think if you look at the spectrum, the possibilities of where I could be on that spectrum, I feel like, I'm doing really, really well. And I feel like God's got me on a journey, and I don't know, I haven't listened to maybe enough episodes to know what your faith is, or what your audience's faith may be, if there is, a particular background. But even biblically, God will say, I want you to go stand on the corner of this place. And then when you get there, I'll tell you what you're supposed to do next, and that's kind of the journey that I feel like I'm on. I feel like, the Lord's got me in a place where he's like, I want you to help other people going through grief. And by doing that is kind of like the woman with the magical mustard seed, like I feel like I'm the feedback and the ability to help other people really has fed me so much that I think I'm doing good.
It seems like you're doing good. I'm definitely happy to, follow your journey. I think you have a warmth about you. You're definitely charismatic, and it makes sense as to why people enjoy hearing you speak from a place of experience. And to allude to what you just said, I've kind of uncovered myself more recently than ever, but I feel like I've had in the back of my mind that you may know in a general idea where you want to be, but you don't necessarily have to know how to get there, and you just kind of have the faith that you're going to figure it out. I feel like, as like you're alluding to, like, get to that corner. I don't know how I'm going to get there or what's going to happen after that, but just if you have some level of faith that it's going to come to you in some, whatever you want to call it, supernatural, subconscious, whatever way you want to explain it, I think that's part of it. I think it's a blend of decision and blended with faith as well. And it seems like you're on your way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. So I just want to thank you for being on here once more. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm honored to be seeing you on my computer screen, listening to you make such a profound speech, and then actually have the opportunity to actually speak to you face-to-face, digitally to digital, however you want to say it. So I don't know if there's any last words you want to put out there, or more information on what you got coming up, or anything of the sort to plug you in, but the floor is yours if there's anything to say.
Yeah, I think you asked all the right questions. I feel like I've probably said a lot. I really also just want to thank you really for the opportunity to meet you and to speak to you, and also hear a little bit more about your story, and to thank you for sharing my story with your audience. I hope that, if even one life can breathe easier because of it, I look at it as a huge win. So thank you so much.
Of course, man. And if there's anything ever I can do to help you, I know we don't know each other well, but let me know. I'm over in Los Angeles, always on the East Coast. So I would love to stay in touch, and we'll definitely be in touch after this. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate you, man. We'll talk soon.
Right on.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.